Today we will be discussing early reading, and this will include concepts about print, oral language, phonological and phonemic awareness, phonics, and sight word reading. Whenever we think about these early reading ideas, we need to realize that they are the absolutely crucial key foundation for our students to be able to learn what they need to be successful readers and writers. They're an important aspect of language arts methods that we must consider. What is oral language? Basically, it's the spoken form of communication. It can look like two small babies babbling to one another, and it can also look like someone delivering a graduation speech. Oral language encompasses all of the spoken forms of communications that we use. When we think about language, and in particular oral language, and its connections to literacy, it's very important that we realize that the conditions that encourage children to speak and to listen also provide a solid foundation for the development of reading and writing skills. Children need to use oral language to develop their powers of reasoning and observation, prediction, sequencing, and other skills that are connected with reading. They also need to develop an awareness of the connections between oral and written language. They need to understand that speech can be written down and can be read back. When we consider average oral language development rates, we can think of children in terms of their first 12 months. 0 to 2 months, basically, babies are learning that they can cry to get their needs met, and much of this is instinctual at first. From 2 to 5 months, they are learning to coo and add a coo with a consonant. They laugh, and they learn that they can cry in 3 different ways. One is that they need comfort, another cry communicates they need attention, and another cry communicates that they need to be rescued from distress. As they continue to grow from age 6 to 12 months, babies learn that they can play with vocals, babble, they can say single syllables, they can even attach meaning to those syllables as they label objects. Children who are 1 to 2 years of age have what is called telegraphic speech, in that it has lots of stopping and starting, 2-word phrases. From 2 to 3 years, they have more complex and natural forms of speech. They love to negotiate, and often their favorite word is no because it has such power. From ages 3 to 4, children begin to make complex sentences a part of their oral language. They will overgeneralize language rules. For example, they may not be able to understand yet the irregular verb forms, so they form all past tenses of verbs with an ed. They might say, she rided to school instead of she rode to school. Most children in this age category have between 1,000 and 1,500 words, and their favorite word is typically why. From the age of 4 to 6, most children have mastered most of the elements of adult language. By age 6, usually they have about 6,000 words. Most of their words are completely intelligible. If they're not, then this is a red flag that perhaps the child is going to need some speech therapy. They love to participate in imaginative and generative language, and they love potty words. The biggest reason for this is that when they use a potty word, typically they have a big response from someone, maybe laughter from their friends or siblings, and dismay often from their parents and teachers. Recent studies indicate that by the time children reach age 3, their brains are twice as active as those of adults. Other studies show that early childhood is the window of opportunity for language development. During this time, language development increases most rapidly more than at any other period during a lifespan. Language deficits are the most common special ed referral. The wonderful thing about language deficits is that with early and intense intervention, most children can have completely normal speech and language. Language deficits are very highly correlated to poverty. This can be due to a variety of things. One is that these children often have a lack of exposure to language growing experiences. It only makes sense that children who are taken to the zoo and on vacations to fun places, those sorts of children have many more experiences and are exposed to a much broader array of vocabulary. An additional reason that children of poverty may have more language deficits is that very often their parents may be extremely overworked. Both parents are working if they're in a two-parent home, or if they're in a single-parent home, their single parent is working many, many hours, and they have little time left over and little energy to interact with their children. When we try to understand oral language, we have to understand language. What is a language? And basically, it's an agreed-on symbol system. Language is verbal and a visual symbol system used in human society that is capable of representing the full range of our knowledge, experiences, and emotions. When new phenomena come along or new things are discovered, we have to have new words to describe those things because we have to agree on the symbol, the oral language symbol, for the new thing. Language has two aspects, expressive and receptive. Expressive language requires the encoding of thoughts into symbolic systems, both verbal and visual. Receptive language requires the decoding of the language symbol system used by the sender, reading or hearing. Those who are trying to communicate with someone who uses a different symbol system are going to have trouble with both receptive and expressive language. There are several components of the language structure. These include phonology, orthography, morphology, syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. What is the smallest unit of sound in language? Basically, the smallest unit of sound in language is the phoneme. Now, phonemes are parts of spoken words. Phonology is the study of the sound structure of oral language. Now, when we think about orthography, those are the patterns linking letters. Letters are called graphemes to sounds, which are called phonemes in spoken language, to produce conventional spellings. So what is orthography? Conventional spelling. Morphology is the study of word structure. Syntax is the rules of how words are combined. It's basically grammar. Semantics are how your background, knowledge, interest, and attitudes are all go into helping form your language. And it's often common to cultures. Those perspectives connect to your comprehension of the language. Etymology is how words' meanings and language meanings change over time. Now, phonology is the sounds in speech. Prosodic features of our language are intonation, stress, and juncture. I'm sure you've all heard someone who is not a native speaker of English say words in which their intonation, stress, and their juncture is not like that of a native speaker. Now, the articulatory units of language include words, then syllables. Syllables can be broken down into rhyme and onset, and then sounds, the phonemes. Rhyme is basically the vowel sound in every other sound that follows the vowel sound in a spoken syllable. The onset are all the sounds in a spoken syllable that come before the vowel sound. So if we look at the list of words, bill, fill, hill, that are on this slide, the onset of the word bill are all the sounds in that syllable that come before the vowel sounds. So the onset of the word bill is B, while the rhyme in the word bill, R-I-M-E, is the correct spelling. The rhyme in that word is ill. So rhymes can also represent word families. We can see that bill, fill, hill, and all of the words in that list have the same rhyme. Teaching rhymes can help students generalize and know many words if they know the rhyme and the letters that come before the rhyme. So how is language structured? Many people are confused about the difference between phonemic awareness and phonological awareness. And what we have to realize is that phonemic awareness is actually an aspect of phonological awareness. Phonological awareness is an umbrella term that spans the very simplest ability to hear sounds and language to the very complex. So phonological awareness at its most simple is the ability to hear oral rhymes and alliteration. When children can understand that bill and pill rhyme, then they are beginning to have the simplest form of phonological awareness. When we're trying to teach children to read who don't have phonological awareness, we're going to struggle greatly because these are foundational pieces of being good readers. Now, after a child develops that ability to hear oral rhymes and alliteration, or when words begin with the same sounds, then we move on to a little bit more complex form of phonological awareness in which they can hear words in spoken sentences. This is the time in the development of a child when they understand that speech is not a free-flowing stream with no separation. They understand that individual words make up sentences. After they have a firm understanding of this, children can learn that there are syllables in spoken words. These children are able to clap out syllables. For example, structure, that has 2 syllables, and the child could clap out those syllables. Now, the more complex form of phonological awareness comes when children are able to hear the onsets and rhymes in words. In other words, they can hear the in hill as well as the ill. Now, when they can hear all of the individual sounds, the phonemes in the words, they have phonemic awareness. They are aware of phonemes. So in the word bill, they would be able to hear b, I, l. Now, while that word has 4 letters, it only has 3 phonemes or 3 sounds. So when we think about the structure of language, orthography is, as we said before, spelling, conventional patterns. Now, the patterns used in English to link letters to sounds or the graphemes to the phonemes, when we know the conventional ways to do that linking, then we have traditional spelling. Now, in English, that's complicated a little bit because we only have 26 graphemes or letters, and we use that to spell 44 phonemes. So 26 graphemes represent 44 phonemes in 500 letter or letter combinations. Now, when a child understands and they know that speech sounds and letters link to one another, they know that a letter makes a sound, then they understand the alphabetic principle. When they begin to understand the relationships between letters and sounds, then they are beginning to understand phonics. So what is the smallest unit of meaning in language? A morpheme is the smallest unit of meaning. Morphology is when we study word structures and their meanings. A free morpheme is a morpheme that stands alone and has meaning. For example, the morpheme ball has a meaning that we understand. It's connected to something. We understand that symbol. A bound morpheme must be connected to another morpheme. For example, we know that ology means study of, but that morpheme doesn't make sense by itself. We have to connect it with another morpheme, such as bio, to have a word that we understand. So bio means life, ology means study of. Those two morphemes together make the word biology. Some may wonder why we are taking the time to talk about oral language. Oral language is such a critical element of early reading that we must attend to it. Oral language is strongly related to children's early reading success and in predicting their ability to comprehend what they read. Not only is it important for reading, but oral language is the foundation of learning, schooling, and living together as people of the world. Because language affects not only our cognitive growth, but also our social competence. Children who learn to speak and interact successfully with others tend to develop more effective learning strategies and literacy skills. There are a number of contexts in which we can very naturally teach oral language, many of which occur in kindergarten and pre-K classrooms that are taught in a way that is developmentally appropriate. Students can develop their oral language through social interaction. They can develop it as they engage in sensory motor activities, in literacy activities. They can develop their oral language when they participate in show and share or show and tell. As they speak and learn about the content of all learning areas, they can also develop their oral language. Developmental play centers are a crucial area where our students can naturally use oral language skills and develop them. Inquiry-based activities and language experiences are also key ways that teachers can allow students to have experiences about which they can speak. Having instructional conversations with students, being intentional about the development of oral language is crucial. Something that is fun and effective to teach to young children is to speak in complete sentences. You can teach them what is called the rule of 5. The sentence, I speak in complete sentences, has 5 words. And if a student is speaking in phrases or in one word burst, 1 or 2 word burst, we can remind them, remember, we need 5. Speak in complete sentences. I speak in complete sentences. This is something that may take a little while for students to understand and to learn, but once you help them begin to think this way, they will develop faster in their oral language. Very often in our classrooms, we will have students who speak a great deal and students who are content to sit back and listen to others. Sometimes our students who need the opportunity to speak the most are the ones who are not taking or being given that opportunity. Whenever we have our students in small groups, such as in a dramatic play center or working at the table with the teacher or other structured settings where they can be in small groups and have conversations, they can develop more rapidly. You can set this up as a question-comment type of session. You can model how to have conversations by doing so with the fishbowl technique, where some of your more adept students at speaking can sit at a table and the rest of the class can observe them like they're in a fishbowl, and they can interact over content or just have a conversation. And you can show the other students what is good about the way that they are speaking. Another thing that I've done often to keep some students from monopolizing the conversation, I will give students who need to be reminded to give others turns to talk little plastic coins or some kind of little thing to hold in their hand or on their desk or table, like a chip. We called them talking chips in my classroom. and I would give them a certain number of chips, maybe 5 per learning time, and every time they spoke, I would quietly, unobtrusively walk over and take a chip from their desk as a reminder that they were using up their times to speak. Once they used all their chips, they were no longer allowed to speak for that part of the learning experience. This is very helpful to keep some children who do not know how to moderate and limit their talking. It's helpful as a visual reminder to them as how much they should be speaking. We have to explicitly explain polite, active listening and respectful responding to our students. Some do not have this modeled in their homes, or if they do, they have not attended to it. Discussing book characters and aspects of books is an excellent way for us to have small group conversations with our students. We can ask them what they plan to do for fun after school. Their parents can ask them, what did you learn today in school? We can discuss their favorite foods and other favorites, as well as current events. Other instructional strategies that are quite successful are about me, which is really just show and tell. When you allow students to bring things from home, you can let them have a bridge between their home culture and their school culture. It lets them not only practice oral language skills, but it allows the entire class to get to know each member better and understand them better. It's important to have guidelines for your show and tell, to set it up in a structured way. In my classroom, we would have weekly list of students who are allowed to bring something, and one of my hard and fast rules that I always stuck to was they could not bring toys. No toys were allowed. They could bring pictures, or maybe something their family had made together, or something they drew, or a story they wrote, or maybe their granddad's hat, but they could not bring toys. Another very, very tried and true way that some teachers are getting away from in the world of high-stakes testing is to have dramatic play. When we have puppets and felts and other sorts of things available for our students to pretend with, then we allow them to practice their oral language, as well as to think about story grammar. What makes a story? A beginning, a middle, and an end. We have to have characters, and they often have dialogue within a story. All of these things are very good for students to be engaged in our literacy classrooms. Another fun activity is to have instructions and directions. You can put pairs of students, send them on a treasure hunt. You could have students work in pair where a blindfolded student gives directions to one that is not blindfolded. They can do something like make pudding or a sandwich or something like that. And the other thing that we need to remember is oral language and literacy in general need to be happening in a happy, fun, good context. When we have divertive oral language instruction, things that are funny, like jokes or riddles or pundles or sniglets or humorous songs, we allow our students to practice their oral language and to learn more about literacy in a non-threatening environment. So we've talked about oral language. Let's go on to speak about some of the other aspects of early reading. Phonemes. We've talked just a little bit about phonemes before. When we think about phonemes, what is the importance of a child being aware of phonemes, of having phonemic awareness? Actually, studies have shown that whenever we know a child's phonemic awareness ability, it predicts their literacy performance better than intelligence test, better than vocabulary knowledge, and better than socioeconomic status. So phonemic awareness is important to develop. The good thing about phonemic awareness is that about 20 hours of phonemic instruction is typically enough for a child to have phonemic awareness. Now, some children come to school completely phonemically aware because of the activities and games and types of things they've done within their homes. Other students come and they need all 20 hours to happen at school. So we need to be building this into our classroom, into the culture and curriculum of the early reading classroom, so that those who do not have this developed can develop it. And it's always good for the other children to engage in phonemic awareness activities as well. So let's review what phonemic awareness is. It's the ability to hear sounds in spoken language. It's a listening skill. A child with phonological awareness can identify and make oral rhymes. They can hear, identify, and play with sounds and words, and they can hear the syllables in words. Phonological awareness is an umbrella skill where phonemic awareness is the most finely developed aspect of phonological awareness. So a child with phonemic awareness is going to be able to do several things. They can hear individual sounds and words. They can identify and manipulate those sounds and words. And remember, when we're talking about phonemic awareness, none of this is tied to a written word yet. It is all happening with spoken words. So, for example, a child with well-developed phonemic awareness can hear that the word bug has 3 sounds, b, and g. A child with phonemic awareness can add sounds, like if we said, take the sound l and add it to 8, what do you get? That child would be able to tell us late. If we ask them, can you take the t sound away from train, what do you get? And they should be able to tell us rain. Now, phonemic awareness is an important step toward understanding the alphabetic principle. And the alphabetic principle is simply knowing that words are composed of letters, and each letter in a printed word is connected to a spoken sound. So phonemic awareness is different from phonological awareness in that it's an aspect of it, and it's different from phonics because phonemic awareness is not attached to the written word. It is only attached to the spoken word, whereas phonics is looking at written words. So when we're assessing phonological awareness skills, it is important to note that children's phonological awareness abilities develop on a continuum of skills over time. These include from the simplest to the most complex, from rhyme and alliteration to sentence segmentation, to word or syllable segmentation, to onset rhyme blending and segmentation, to phonemic blending, to phonemic segmentation and manipulation. Phonological awareness refers to the more general understanding of the sound structure of words and sentences. Phonemic awareness begins at the phony blending and segmenting level of this continuum. However, many of you may have readers unable to perform phoneme blending and segmenting, and in that case you need to practice easier activities on the continuum. Something that I like is to think of phonemic awareness as phonics in the dark. You're not seeing any words, you're only hearing them. So a continuum for teaching phonemic awareness would be to go from top down. First, you need to teach students to recognize individual words and sentences, then you teach syllables, then onset rhyme, and then phoneme. So to support the development of phonemic awareness, we need to remember to keep things fun. Songs and chants, rhyming games, nursery rhymes, rhyming poetry, all of those things need to be a part of the early reading classroom. When we ask children to listen for beginning and ending sounds, we are practicing phonemic awareness. When we say, children love the game, what's left off? So you say, what's left when we? What's left when we take the s away from smile? Then they would say mile. Children, if we ask them, st plus up is stop. Or we can say, what would stop be without the st? Those are all the sorts of games we can play to develop phonemic awareness. There are many activities that a teacher can and should be doing in their early reading classroom, such as these. So how do we know when to add the alphabet instruction to phonemic awareness instruction? When our students can successfully blend and segment CVC words without letters first and know most of the letter names, then we can begin to teach them the sounds attached to those letter names. So when we combine phonemic awareness with letter name knowledge, then we have the alphabetic principle. This is when our students understand that the letters and sounds in spoken words connect in systematic ways. They recognize that there's a code and it can be broken. So when we look at early reading developmental processes, we can think of them in this way. When students learn concepts of print, which we're going to talk a little bit more about, and this concepts of print, when that is well developed, they have letter knowledge also, they have phonological and phonemic awareness, and then they have phonic skills, which eventually all of that leads to fluent word reading. Then on the other side, when they have oral language vocabulary development, which can lead to comprehension strategies that are used when listening to text that's read aloud, they can have reading vocabulary development, and eventually they can begin to use comprehension strategies in reading of text. Those processes add up to the fluent connected text processing and comprehension that is done by skilled readers. So we've talked about some other early reading skills. Let's go ahead and talk about phonics now. What is phonics? Basically, phonics is instruction in the relationship between letters and the sounds they represent. It's a teaching method that relates those spoken sounds to written symbols in a systematic and predictable way. And it's how this knowledge can be used by readers to decode words. In the past, some people have thought that phonics is filling out worksheets on some concepts such as these, but phonics is no good unless we are teaching our students to use the knowledge from phonics to decode words and to use the knowledge from phonics to spell and write in conventional ways. So now let's think about what is decoding. When a child or an individual is able to decode, they can convert a word from print to speech. They are breaking the code of what sounds are represented by what letters are on the page. The phonics skills that students learn and apply that help them figure out the pronunciation of unfamiliar words is basically decoding ability. So decoding is what allows us to participate in word attack. So when we identify each letter in a sequence in a word, and we match a speech sound to each letter or maybe sets of letters, and we blend together the string of speech sounds represented by the letters, then we have participated in decoding. Is decoding ability important? There's a very strong connection, longitudinal studies have shown, between the first grade decoding skills and ninth grade comprehension. Learning to read words is essential for comprehending text, and there are too many words for our students to be able to memorize all of them as sight words. Now, with that being said, we need to recognize that word recognition is important. We cannot be skilled readers if we have to decode every single word that we come to. So word recognition is when a reader can instantly identify words as wholes without resorting to the decoding, that analysis of the sounds letter by letter and blending them within a word. Word recognition is more than just being able to pronounce correctly. It's knowing what the words mean. When we're discussing phonics, we often talk about that phonics instruction must be systematic and explicit. And what does that mean? Basically, when we think systematic, we need to understand that the way that we present phonics skills, it needs to be organized and in a logical manner that allows students to see the alphabetic principle becoming evident as they break the code. New skills should build on existing skills, and tasks should be arranged from simple to complex. Explicit, when we think of explicit instruction, we need to clearly explain and model concepts and skills. We have to clearly, overtly, and thoroughly communicate. When I was growing up, I was taught with the whole language approach to reading, and I never learned any phonics skills. So I had a huge sight word vocabulary, and I learned just from reading many phonics skills, but some I did not learn until I was an adult in taking education classes. So explicit phonics instruction teaches students the rules in a way that they can understand and apply them consistently. So concepts about print, phonological and phonemic awareness, and letter name knowledge are some things we've all touched on already, these early reading instruction skills that we should be focusing on. I want to go back to concepts about print. What are concepts about print? And basically it's helping children to realize that print works in certain ways. And with English, we help them understand that directionality is important when we're reading and writing. We go from left to right and from top to bottom. We need to teach them the idea that we have words, and words are made of letters. We teach them how to handle books and hold them, and we teach them that books have very often a table of contents, an index. They're arranged in chapters. They go from beginning to end. We teach them that our voice matches to print on the page, and we teach them how to apply punctuation. So how do we know what to teach our students in the early reading classroom? We know by what we assess. We need to assess oral language, vocabulary, and development. We need to assess their knowledge of concepts about print. We need to assess phonological and phonemic awareness, letter name knowledge, sight word recognition, phonics knowledge, and listening comprehension. Many of these tests are available through informal reading inventories such as the Jerry Johns, which is used in the Pathways program. Marie Clay makes a concepts about print test. However, some of these can simply be assessed using simple means. We can hand a book to our students in a way that isn't right side up, but just hand them a book and see how they hold it. Do they understand going from beginning to end? Their oral language can also be assessed informally. We can assess their letter name knowledge by writing all of the uppercase and lowercase letters down on sheets of paper and asking them, not in order, in case they know the ABC song, to name various letters until we have tested all of them, and then we can work only on the ones that they don't know. We can also test them over sight words and make a list of the ones that they know and the ones they don't know, and teach them specifically those words. All of these ways of assessing are very important because they help us know what to teach. Now, when we are giving instruction in print concepts, we need to teach our students what are the functions of print. We need to teach them how to map speech onto print. We need to teach them the technical aspects of print as well. The directionality, the spatial orientation. When we're teaching students to write words, one simple thing we can do is to teach them to have about a finger's amount of space between each letter in the words that they're writing. We have to teach them that print is all around us. We teach them that when we're looking at books and the message is coming from the print on the page, not from the pictures, that one written word is equal to one spoken word. All of these are things that we can use to teach concepts about print to our students. Environmental print is often one of the first types of print that students will attend to. We can develop this by having an ABC bulletin board of product labels. So we have a bulletin board that has the letters A through Z, and when students find something in their home or in the classroom, they can cut it out and bring it and put it on their bulletin board. For example, if they find a Cheerios box, and they see that it starts with the letter C, they could actually cut the word out or just bring in the whole box and put that on the bulletin board. Having labels all over the room is very beneficial to helping students understand concepts about print, and it also helps develop their sight word vocabulary. I Can Read books are fun using product labels. You can have 5 to 10 letters that are already familiar to children and have those letters on a page and put products on those pages that that begin with that letter. Here's an example of the bulletin board that we were discussing. Here's an example of when we label the room. Now, one of the most effective ways to develop many early reading concepts is shared reading. Often we use big books for this, and we have a text that's large enough for students to be able to see from 20 feet away. We do this process by showing the front cover of the book and reading the title. We show the front and back covers and we discuss them and what we think might happen in the book. We point out things on the cover and title page, such as the author's name and illustrator's name. When we read dramatically. We can even touch the words as we're reading. We can invite students to read along on repeated or predictable words or phrases. They love doing this. We can allow students to talk with us as we read the book, to explain their favorite parts. We can let them make predictions and respond and tell their own connections. We can point to specific words using sticky notes and pointers, small whiteboards. All sorts of things can be used to develop these. Some strategies that support the learning of the alphabet are very commonly done, and you've probably done them yourselves or seen someone do them. Post the children's names in places that will help them identify the names. You occasionally will point to the letters spelling their names for them. Print each letter of a child's name on separate cards or pieces of paper and scramble them, and let the child reconstruct his or her name as he or she matches the cut-up version to the complete one. Additionally, having alphabet charts at the children's eye level where they can look at them can be helpful. You can place the children's names on index cards and pocket charts so that they can be removed and read closely. You can use only a few minutes at a time to do this. Ask the children to find their names, find names or words that start with the same letter or end with the same letter. Reading alphabet books is a good way to develop this knowledge of the alphabet. Encouraging students to read those books with a buddy by looking at the pictures and noting the letters is also good. Having students experiment with letter forms in all different ways can also be helpful. So let's review what is, when we think of good phonics instruction, what does that look like? Well, first of all, it develops an understanding of the alphabetic principle. It also will incorporate phonemic awareness and help students who don't have that fully developed develop that first. It will provide sufficient practice in reading words. It should lead to automatic word recognition, and it should be part of a comprehensive program. It can't be hit or miss. It must be systematic. So when you think of a general sequence for teaching phonics, first we begin by teaching them single consonants and short vowels, then consonant digraphs. Then we go on to long vowels with silent E, long vowels at the ends of words or syllables. We teach them next Y as a vowel, then R-controlled vowels, finally silent consonants, vowel digraphs or teams, and variant vowel digraphs and diphthongs. On your course resources, you will find something called the Reading Horizon syllabus. If you had no other phonics program, you could use this syllabus to teach the concepts that you need to teach and going in the order that you need to go just by referring to that syllabus. It's a very valuable resource that I highly recommend that you save and possibly download and print out. So we already said we begin with stable consonants and short vowels, actually with single consonants and short vowels. Which consonants should we begin with? Starting with the ones that are stable, they make the same sound each time they are found in print, are the ones that we should begin with, because that lets students begin to feel that reading is more predictable. Then we move on to consonants that are less stable. and they may make a different sound depending on circumstances. For example, we teach our students the C rule. We tell them that C can copy K or it can copy S. It can say K or S. And how do they know what C is going to copy? They look at the vowel that comes after the C. If the C is followed by an A, O, or U, it's going to make the hard C sound, like cake. If it's followed by E, I, or Y, it will make the soft C sound, like city. And the same rule applies to G. G can copy, it can make a hard sound, G, or a soft sound like J, J, depending on the vowel that follows it. Next, we would move on to teaching consonant blends and clusters. Then we teach students about consonant digraphs. These are two consonant letters that represent one distinct speech sound. We next would teach them vowel letters and sounds. We tell them that sometimes it can be confusing because the vowels don't always say the same thing. Vowels can be 5 to 7 vowels can be written using 96 letter combinations. And I know when I grew up we had only 5 vowels, A, E, I, O, and U. But now when we teach our children the vowels, we tell them A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y and W are our vowels. We don't want to overload students, and for example, we would never say, what is a consonant digraph? It's not important that they know the word digraph. What's important is they know that sometimes 2 letters like T and H will work together to make something totally different than the sound either of them make, that we can't blend them because they work together to make something different. So something else that's important with vowel letters, and it's a brilliant way to approach the teaching of vowel sounds, is to teach the students that a vowel can say its sound or its name. So in the word tame, the vowel A says its name. A, tame. In the word cat, it's making its sound, the A sound. So vowels can say their sound or their name. Next on the continuum of what we should be teaching in our phonics curriculum are vowel digraphs. Basically, a vowel digraph is simply when you have 2 vowels that work together to make one sound, such as the E-E digraph, which makes the long E sound, as in sleep. Next, we have vowel diphthongs. A diphthong is when we have a vowel plus a vowel, and they make a glided sound, a single glided sound, such as down. When you say the word down, in the middle of saying the ow, you can feel your jaw move. That's how you know if you have a diphthong. These are a little bit more difficult, so we teach them after we teach the vowel digraphs. The very most difficult sound for us to teach students to spell and to read is the schwa sound. It's represented by the upside down E. It's basically an sound, and the reason it's so difficult is that any vowel can represent the schwa sound. In the word America, an A is representing the schwa sound. In the word affect, an E is representing the schwa sound. In other, an O is representing that sound. And so on. So it can be very difficult. What I always told my students is, yes, schwa is hard. If it can be written with any vowel, why not try writing it with every vowel until you find one that looks correct, and then you can look it up and check it. R-controlled vowels are vowels that are not long or short, but they are vowels that have been overpowered by what I always called the bossy R. So in the word person, the E does not say its name or its sound. It's basically completely controlled by the R, and it says person, So an R makes any vowel sound very different than it would sound without the R beside it. The first word pattern that we want to teach our students is the CVC word pattern, consonant, vowel, consonant. We don't wait until our students know all the concepts for phonics or even all the letters. We can begin to teach them to read CVC words as soon as they know some consonants and maybe even only one vowel. It's fun to go ahead and teach them to read these words because then they feel like they are readers, and this is motivational. So the word cut is a CVC word. It has the consonant C, the vowel U, and the consonant T, and it spells cut. We can teach our students that when they see this vowel pattern, this word pattern, the vowel sound is usually short. The next word pattern usually taught in a phonics program is the CV pattern, consonant vowel. These are usually going to make a long sound, such as in the words be, go, so. They can occur, this word pattern can occur within words, such as within a syllable. And we teach our students that when they see this vowel pattern to try the vowel with the long sound to see if it makes sense that way. The next word pattern we introduce to our students is the VCE pattern, vowel with a consonant and then a silent E. Now there may be a consonant or a consonant blend or digraph at the beginning of this word pattern, but we analyze our word patterns starting with the vowels usually. So the VC silent E word pattern, we teach our students that usually that first vowel is going to be long and the E is usually silent, such as in the words cape, rope, and shade. The CVVC word pattern typically has where the first vowel is usually long and the second is usually silent. However, there are many exceptions within this word pattern that we need to be acknowledging from the beginning of teaching this pattern to our students. However, typically when you see a vowel in a vowel, the first one will make its long sound and the second one will be silent. Whenever we teach our students about onset and rhyme, it's beneficial because this is a more reliable way than just looking at vowel letters and vowel letter combinations. It's a more reliable way to decode words. We've talked about before that the onset of the word is the part of the syllable that comes before the vowel, while the rhyme is the rest of that syllable. Rhyme is spelled R-I-M-E, and that is the correct spelling, but rhymes rhyme with each other. We teach, sometimes we call these word families, so we might have the word spring, and then the word spring, the rhyme is ing, and once a child learns that rhyme, they can decode many words that have the ing as a portion of the word. There are many kinds of blending routines that we can use when we're teaching our students to decode words. These blending routines can be sound by sound, we can use continuous, we can use whole word, we can use spelling focused routines. We're going to be talking about those a little bit more. So we would like for our students to have many words that they automatically recognize and do not have to decode. That is in fact the goal of phonics instruction. Text, however, can be decodable, it can be predictable or patterned, and it can be authentic. So authentic text is going to be the most difficult type of text for our students to read, but it's also probably going to be the most interesting and definitely what they encounter the most in their actual reading. However, decodable and predictable pattern books can be helpful for those readers who need to build confidence. One of the beautiful things about teaching rhymes is the fact that if you teach your students these 37 rhymes, they will be able to read 500 primary words. Now, when we think about reading is actually about half of reading is decoding. We have to break down the words, but the other half is made up of about 100 high-frequency words, high-frequency sight words. And if we teach our students those words, they can read half of what's written in most books. So word recognition is an important element of our early reading program. We need to teach those high-frequency words. These are the words that occur the most often in printed text. For example, when we teach our students to read the word the, we just taught them how to read 5% of the words in printed text. we can teach them the next 107 words, and they will have the ability to read 50% of words in print. However, please note that if you teach them the next 100 high-frequency words, that's only going to make up 2% of the words that they will be reading in printed text. So there is a cost-benefit analysis that helps us realize that we teach the 107 words, and then we do not teach others after that, because the benefit is not going to be there for taking the teaching time to do that. They'll learn the rest through wide reading. You will see on the next several slides words that are on that high frequency list, the 107 words that we should teach our students to be able to read, to recognize and not have to decode. And some of them are not even decodable because they are trick words. They don't follow the rules of phonics. So how do we go about teaching high-frequency sight words? Basically, one of the most effective means is to teach students to take a word that they're trying to learn to read, a high-frequency sight word they want to memorize. You teach them by saying, see the word, and you show them the word, and then you say the word, they say the word, then spell the word aloud, then write the word, and check it to see if they wrote it correctly. So now let's talk a little bit about how we teach our students to read multisyllabic words. It's not decoding on a letter phoneme level or an onset rhyme level or a body coda level. Basically, they use their knowledge of memorized and meaningful word parts that are often added to base or root words to attack words and be able to pronounce those words. For example, in the word unbelievable, the root word would be believe, and then the prefix un and the suffix able can all be broken down when they see that big giant word. They can look for the parts they do know how to say and then use that knowledge to read the entire word. When we teach our students how to do this kind of reading, this analysis, this word attack, we teach them again about morphemes, which we talked about earlier, can be bound or free. Free morphemes are our root or base words, while bound ones are our affixes. Affix is a word that means both prefixes and suffixes together. So if you want to help your students become readers, you should teach them high-frequency sight words, and you know what to teach them by using a high-frequency sight word test. Something that I've done is I put the 107 sight words on flashcards, and I go through and I have a marking sheet with the words written on it, and I can put checks or X's as I run through them with students and record which ones they know. The benchmark for a first grader is to be able to say 60 of those words per minute. High frequency sight words are mastered when all of the 107 are known. And we can get parents to help us with this. We can have students practice together. We don't have students go over and over and over words they already know. We have them work on small chunks of words, sets of words that have some words they know and some they don't, so that they're not completely discouraged by having to constantly try to figure out new words. So we might add in a couple of new words per week to a set of, say, 5 or 6 words they already know. And we filter the known words out as they learn new words, but we leave the newest words in their stack of words they practice so they get additional practice over them. Now, something we talked about early on in the class are phonics assessments, including running records. This is important for us to do because it lets us know students' reading level, but there are many phonics assessments that can let us know much more detail about what students know in the area of phonics. The Jerry Johns has some ability to test these things. One of my favorite books is the Core book, which if any of you would like to know more about, please email me. It has some very specific phonics tests that can let us know what we need to teach our students. So now let's talk more about blending strategies. Sequential is one type of blending strategy. Basically, you teach your students to scan each letter of a word, moving from left to right, saying the associated sound of each letter, and blending the letter sounds together to say the words. Students have to have explicit modeling and guided practice to do this. And you need to start with single syllable CVC words and then move on to words that have consonant digraphs and blends and clusters, and then vowel digraphs and diphthongs and R-controlled vowels, and then on to more complex word patterns. Now, hierarchical blending is a strategy that usually we would begin using in second grade, and it's used for multisyllabic words. We begin by dividing a whole word into syllables, and then we blend those sounds in the syllables, and then blend the syllables. A script for teaching hierarchical blending would sound something like this. Today, we are going to be learning how to blend parts of words to say big words. This is an important thing to learn to be a good reader. Being a good reader helps you learn in school and discover many other things in school and in life. We then teach the students to find all the vowels in the word and underline those vowels. Then we teach them rules for breaking the words into parts around the vowels. For example, they never should divide double vowels. They should never divide consonant digraphs. They can divide double consonants that are not digraphs. So for example, they could divide effort between the two F's, but they would not divide ethereal between the T and H. So let's think about encoding. What if we're trying to teach students to sequentially segment words? First, we teach them to stretch words like a rubber band. They should say the word slowly, count how many sounds they hear, and make a blank for each sound they hear. They stretch the word again to hear the first sound and write it in the first blank, and they repeat the process until they have at least one letter for every sound they hear. When you're doing this, you'll begin with CVC words and continue until that is mastered, and then you'll teach them how to do this with consonant digraphs, blends, and so on. Now, hierarchical segmenting is a little bit more complicated because you do it with multisyllabic words. You teach them to stretch the words into syllables, to draw a long line for each syllable, and then you check how many sounds are in each syllable and draw a short line over the long line and continue the process of sounding and putting those letters down to represent sounds until the entire word is spelled. So if we were to take the word macaroni as an example of how to do hierarchical segmenting, we would first count out the syllables, macaroni, and we would teach our students to draw 4 long lines because we have 4 syllables. Then we would teach them to sound out how many sounds are in each syllable. So in the first syllable, mac, a, k, that has 3. So you can see in our first long line, we have 3 red lines to show that we need to have 3 sounds there. Now, this next syllable, mac, is that dreaded schwa sound. It's only 1 sound in that syllable, so we only have 1 red line. Then we have our next syllable, macaro, and that is going to have, we can look at it 2 ways, and either way will work out, but macaron, some people would do it that way. We could have either 3 sounds or 2 sounds that we would write down in that syllable. And then our final one, macaroni, there's only 1 sound, so we'll only have 1 letter in that 4th syllable. You can do this, you can have them use long lines done in pencil and then have each sound done with a crayon or highlighter. This is a very beneficial activity to teach them not only how to segment words, but how to begin to have more traditional spelling. I always told my students our spelling is, it's okay to have a spelling that does not look like the way mom or a teacher or dad might spell the word, because we're spelling things in a temporary way right now until we learn more about traditional spelling. And I always would reiterate with them that the most important thing is to be able to communicate what we're trying to communicate. And I would tell them, if you have a letter for every sound, anyone can read what you're trying to say. And I also promised my students that I would not post things outside of our classroom that did not have traditional spelling because they were very worried about that and that other kids might laugh, or some of them have come from homes where if they write anything and it's misspelled, they're automatically corrected. I think it's important, very important, that they have the practice with sounding out words and doing the segmenting, the hierarchical segmenting, so that their literacy skills can grow, and we have to make our environment safe for doing that. So let's go back to talking about our high frequency sight words. A good strategy to use when teaching high frequency sight words is the 10-20 rule. You practice and review every 18 to 36 days in a school year. So the 25 kindergarten sight words can be taught in 5 weeks and reviewed 7 times in that school year. There are 82 remaining words that can be taught in first grade at a rate of 2 to 3 new words per day for 7 weeks, which would allow for 5 review cycles. If we stick to a schedule like this, and we're working hard with individual students to master words they don't know, we can end up with our students getting to 2nd grade having mastered all 107 high-frequency sight words that they need to know, which will equate to them being able to read half of the words in print. So it's important that we do have a schedule, that we do this faithfully, and that we're documenting through assessment practices which students may need more help in learning those words. So one of the most effective ways to go about teaching these phonemic awareness skills and the phonics skills and the oral language skills and our high frequency sight words are to assess students and group those with like needs. Now, we don't want to always have our groups remain static, because we can end up with problems in other ways, which we've talked about earlier in this class, but we do want to be able to teach effectively. So sometimes we'll have students working with other students who may need special help on consonant digraphs. Those same students, maybe 2 of them from that group, could be in another group where they're needing some extra practice with the hierarchical segmenting. So we group our students according to what we need to teach them. We know what we need to teach them because we are assessing them, and we're modifying our instruction to be able to meet their needs. So in groups, if we have a series like this for our lessons, it's very effective because we need to go from whole part to back to whole instruction. Our students need to see literacy as a whole text. We don't want them to think that learning to read is about learning discrete skills. We need to help them know those are strategies we use as readers, but readers and writers interact with whole text. So a good sequence to go through within a small group lesson is to have 5 minutes where they're rereading familiar text, which can build confidence and give them practice and help them become more fluent. Then have 5 minutes of phonics instruction for the entire group, and then 10 minutes of reading and applying those skills they've learned about in a new text. So you would need to have them reading on an instructional level, decodable text on concepts that they need to practice. And then finally, you might do 5 minutes of word work using their high frequency words in isolation, like with their personal word banks or flashcards and pairs, and then spend 5 minutes of writing. Perhaps you'll want to also incorporate into your small group time a time where you read aloud to them from a book that they enjoy. Maybe it's a poem or a book, but always go back to that whole text and focus on what it means to be a reader and a writer. Now, a special case we need to think about, in our classrooms, we're going to have students who are English language learners, and those students are going to need for us to think about the language that they already know, the language of their home, and think about the language that we need for them to become more adept at to be able to succeed in school. So we can't just focus on conversational English. We need to think about academic English as well. We're always going to focus on their key reading components that we do with the other students, but we need to remember that we want to encourage literacy in their first language. A very common thing that can happen when children are going home and they want to read in their first language, sometimes their parents are very reticent to allow them to do that because they feel that that may not allow their child to progress as quickly in English. but I've always encouraged my parents of English language learners from the very beginning of the school year to speak to their children in their home language and to read with their children in their home language, because this greatly benefits them becoming literate in English as well. We also need to be very cognizant as teachers of the awareness. We need to be aware of the differences between English and our students' home language. For example, Spanish, if Spanish is their language, a Spanish E makes a long E sound, and there's no sh sound in the Spanish language. When we see that sound, it's going to be something that could be confusing for our students. So we need to remember all of these early reading skills are going to be learned much more easily if we focus on motivation and engagement. If we are going about this type of teaching in a way that's engaging, our students are going to be motivated to learn. Playing games and taking a playful approach to the learning is what should be happening in the early reading classrooms. Letter sound cards, phonics, fish card games, stomping, clapping, tapping, and snapping, and the hearing of syllables, singing fun songs, sang tongue twisters to review consonants, even the use of nonsense words can all increase our students' engagement to participate in these activities. Something that I've found students greatly enjoy, and it's such a simple way to incorporate technology, and anytime we incorporate technology, we are usually going to see our students' engagement go up, is to simply make a PowerPoint of all the sight words. After you do your initial assessment of your students, you can have a special PowerPoint for every child in your room by deleting the words they already know and making a PowerPoint that is specific to that child. You can email it to the parents if they have access to computers and to PowerPoint, to the program. Simply using a computer to practice the words can make them more motivated to want to practice those words. So when we think about differentiation, we must think about those children who are struggling to learn these early reading skills despite us using evidence-based practices and doing good teaching. What could be causing them to not learn? You will very often have dyslexic students in your classroom, and dyslexia has come to be a term that is used to describe many conditions, but basically it is a learning disability that's neurological in origin. It's characterized by difficulties with accurate and fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. Very often students who have dyslexia are of above average or high intelligence. And these students are going to need a special approach to be able to master many of the concepts from early reading. Their instruction should be individualized, it should be intensive, it must be multisensory, and it should include writing and spelling components. So on this slide you can see a copy of what I used when I would work with my students in small groups. When they were reading with me, I would always have one of these sitting beside each student, and when they came to a word they didn't know how to read, I would ask them to pick a strategy. And you can see the strategies on here are very simple, and students sometimes like to use one strategy much more than others, and when that would happen, I would put sticky notes on the strategies that I wanted to cover up and they weren't allowed to pick to try. A strategy can be as simple as just looking at the pictures and using the clues from the picture to figure out what that word might be. Getting your mouth ready to make the first sound is the first step, because that lets your brain begin processing because your mouth is ready to say the first sound. I would have them try sliding through the whole word. Sometimes spelling the word out loud will help them be able to remember what that word is. Skipping hard words and reading to the end of the sentence and then going back is a great strategy because it can help them use the context clues of the sentence to figure out the word. I asked them to try a different vowel sound. So we've been teaching them phonics rules, and they know about the schwa sound. They know that there are rules for how vowels make sounds, but sometimes vowels don't always obey the rules. So what we try to do is empower them when they see a vowel to simply just try a different vowel sound. If they've been trying the sound that the word makes, for example with A, if they've been trying the sound that A makes and they say ah in the word and it doesn't make sense, then try having the A make its other sound, A, and that could help them figure out the word. So there are many strategies. I found this little strategy sheet to be very helpful, and I can upload that to course resources so that you can have that available if you'd like to print it out and possibly laminate it and use it with your students in small group work. So strategies that we can use as teachers to support phonics learning. We need to take advantage of opportunities to discuss interesting sound letter patterns in literature when we're reading aloud. We need to establish that the relations among words or parts of words and what they look and sound like. We notice things in written language all day long throughout the day. We invite our students to help us write messages, to write lists, and as they become more knowledgeable, you have them help sound out and spell words on the board as you're writing. One of the most effective things that you can do as a teacher in an early reading classroom is to have a morning message that you write to your students and read with them each day. These are more strategies that you can try. Now, one of the things that I'd like to emphasize the most with you, and I think that you should emphasize with your other students in your classrooms, as well as with students' parents, when we're listening to children read, we must avoid immediately telling them words they do not know or that they've read incorrectly, because when we do that, we rob them of the opportunity to practice those words. Instead, we need to help them apply strategies for sounding out words, strategies for figuring out what the words are, decoding and word attack skills. We need to be able to give them constant feedback as they're trying to learn these things in a scaffolded environment such as small groups or in pairs. We want them to rely on multiple strategies, cueing systems to be able to read words, because what works in one situation may not work in another, so we want them to have multiple strategies to try. When you're thinking of teaching your students onset rhymes, you can play simple consonant substitution games. You use a known word and have the students generate as many words as they can that rhyme with that word. You write down each word, guide the children to notice the similarities. A fun game that I played with my students is, I am thinking of a word. You have the children guess orally first. After they've caught on, you begin to have them write the words independently and then share what they have written.